Have a Bible at the ready. If you don't already, go to Psalm 120. We're going to spend some time this morning picking up where we left off last week. Now, for those who were not here, give me just 2 seconds to set the stage, if you will. We are in the midst of an ongoing series now through what are called the Songs of Ascent. For those who don't know, the Songs of Ascent are a special collection or grouping of psalms within the broader book of Psalms, and it's specifically Psalms 120 through 134. Now, as I talked about last week, the ancient Jews, way back when, would use these psalms when traveling to or making pilgrimage to the city of Jerusalem, as they were required multiple times a year to go experience these holy feasts unto the Lord. Unleavened bread, the Feast of Weeks or Pentecost, and the Feast of Tabernacles or Booths. And since the city is located on a hill, elevation approximately 2,700 feet, according to the all-knowing Google, pilgrims would have to ascend to the city, hence the name Songs of Ascent. So these psalms that we're looking at, 120 through 134, these were used by generations of believers who were making the trek from wherever their home base was, all over the world, to the capital city of Jerusalem. They were used in preparation for worship. All eyes this way for a moment. Before you arrive to the service on a Sunday morning, you should be preparing all morning to encounter the Lord. Can I get an amen to any of those points? It's good stuff. There's something about being prepared to worship. If you had an important meeting tomorrow with an important person, fill in the name, fill in the title, wouldn't you take some time to prepare for said meeting and to ready yourself to encounter and experience whomever it might be? It's the same thing with the Lord. Even though we have this son or daughter relationship with the King of Kings and Lord of Lords, he's still a king. And we should treat him as such and be prepared to enter his presence. They would sing these songs on and on and on in preparation, so that when they finally reached Jerusalem and they participated in the feast, there was kind of this spiritual crescendo that would hit. Kind of like music. Music builds, it goes somewhere, and you feel something. It's the same thing spiritually. I think one of the greatest mistakes we make is we begin worship at 10:30, and then by 11 o'clock we're ready to worship. What if we took the whole morning and we're just ready, so that when 10:30 started, we were just already ready to go? That sermon was free. These songs are also useful in kind of cultivating a sense of national unity and solidarity. Millions of people singing the same songs unto the same Lord. What a tremendously unifying thing. They also provided a sense of insight into the work of the Lord, his heart, and our responsibility and place before him. So being short and easy, they served the nation of Israel well for generations, and millennia later, literally thousands of years later, they are still impactful if we will approach them and read through them and beyond, because they touch upon themes that I would say speak deeply to us, because we're on a journey as well. We're traveling through this life. We are but pilgrims on our way to a heavenly Zion, if you will. And I want to spend the rest of our time this morning, and it's potentially a large undertaking. I want to look at 5 Psalms. Your homework assignment, put on my teacher hat for a second, was to read Psalms 120 through 124. I'll close my eyes. How many did it? Wonderful, all of you. Now, they're short. We're going to go through all of them. It won't take all that long, because I'm only going to give you a bird's eye view. You can spend a lot of time in each of these, but I want to just look at them quickly. I want to expose you to a few principles and themes along the way, and let them speak to you in 2020 as it spoke to people 1,000 years before Christ and beyond. Psalm 120, reading from the NIV. Give me the best 20, 25 minutes of your time. I call on the Lord in my distress, and he answers me. Save me, Lord, from lying lips and from deceitful tongues. What will he do to you, and what more besides, you deceitful tongue? He will punish you, verse 4, with a warrior's sharp arrows, with burning coals of the broom bush. Woe to me that I dwell in Meshach, that I live among the tents of Kedar. Too long have I lived among those who hate peace. I am for peace, but when I speak, they are for war. Now, I'm going to give you a little nugget of biblical interpretation. You ready for this? Pretty much in every psalm, all 150 of them, the opening sentence, the opening line, identifies the theme of the psalm. So for homework, look through and kind of begin to look at that. Because normally the author will introduce a theme, and then he'll spend the rest of the psalm looking at it from an array of angles. So what is the theme, if you will, of Psalm 120? Well, it goes back to verse 1. I call on the Lord in my distress, and he answers me. This psalm is going to emphasize the presence of the Lord in the midst of distress. How many of you have ever been in a place of distress in your life? And you can say the Lord met you in that place. One of the benefits and the beauties of being a believer is we go through precisely nothing alone. We draw strength from the body of believers in the community of faith, but his presence is always with us. Now let's be specific, because what was the distress of this unnamed psalmist? What was the source of his affliction, if you will? Now, the Bible speaks generally to God being with us in the midst of all troubles, but this author is bemoaning a certain trouble. And what is it? It's the distress of being surrounded by evil. I want you to hear this. The author is lamenting the fact that he lives in a broken world that is characterized by deception and violence. Look at verse 2. Save me, Lord, from what specifically? From lying lips and deceitful tongues. Verse 6 and 7. Too long have I lived among those who hate peace. I am for peace, but when I speak, what are they for? What do they want? They want war. This author is lamenting the fact that he has to live in a world that is broken. And more than that, he laments the fact that he has to live far from Jerusalem. And he mentions it in verse 5. Woe to me that I dwell where? In Meshech, in Kedar. Modern-day Turkey and Arabia. He's some distance away from Jerusalem. Now again, note the theme of progression and journey in these Psalms. They begin in Psalm 120, far from Jerusalem, and they culminate in the city itself. So there's a bit of a movement through all of these Psalms. Now, we have to understand that for the ancient people of God, Jerusalem was the place where the Lord uniquely dwelt. So to be far from that was, in a sense, to be far from him, far removed from that place of safety and truth. Instead, this author feels like he's drowning in a world of deception and violence. Can we relate to any of these? Does anyone in the sound of my voice ever lament the fact, too long have I lived in a world that's so given to lies and so given to violence? I'm going to be honest with you, I can't put the TV on these days without hearing something that's untrue or without being bombarded by an image that is inherently violent. I want to say it's the city of Portland, wonderful place, 50-something straight days of violence at nighttime. New York City. Chicago. You name the city, there's a part of it today that's on fire. That grieves me. Can anybody relate to that statement? Too long have I lived in this place. Now, the author, though, has some wisdom, and he provides for us some insight. He doesn't drown in that sea. Instead, what does he do? How does he navigate what he's feeling? He calls to the Lord who saves him. He has an anchor point. In the midst of the crazy, in the midst of the confusion, in the midst of the violence, he has someone that he can look to that orients him, gives him perspective, and sustains him so that he can continue on the journey of life until he reaches literal Jerusalem or the life to come. And there's a lesson there for us. Gang, hear me. These are turbulent times. Now, I'm only 42 years old. To some of you, I'm ancient. To some of you, I'm just a kid getting started out. I'm at that weird place in life. It's a wonderful 10-year block of time. I don't recall ever seeing it quite like this. You know, for those of you who are further down the road, maybe you can go back to the 60s and there's some frame of reference. These are very unnerving times, and I can tell you from pastoral discussions, there are a lot of believers who are unnerved. And they're worried. And they're concerned. Ever put on the news and wonder, is this true or is it not? Where do we get truth these days? Well, there's a place we can still go, and his name is Jesus, and we can still read his word, and we can still discover what is true. And we can be a people who, even in the midst of violence, still call for peace. Blessed are the peacemakers, for they shall be called children of God. There's a lot in this psalm, isn't there? Let's go to Psalm 121. I don't want this to take 2 hours today. I lift my eyes up to the mountains. Where does my help come from? My help comes from the Lord, the maker of heaven and earth. He will not let your foot slip. He who watches over you will not slumber. Indeed, he who watches over Israel will neither slumber nor sleep. You know, as a foster parent, there have been a lot of sleepless nights because the little one just won't rest. God has 7 billion kids plus, numbers growing every day. That's why he doesn't sleep. There's always something to attend to. The Lord watches over who? You. The Lord is your shade at your right hand. The sun won't harm you by day, nor the moon by night. The Lord will keep you from all harm. He will watch over your life. The Lord will watch over your coming and going both now and forevermore. I'm gonna hit a quick rabbit trail. I think some people have more faith in COVID-19 than Psalm 121 verse 7. Read it again. What does it say? The Lord will keep you from all harm. That is not permission to be a moron. That is not permission to go out and be totally reckless. But as you're doing your part, where's our faith that the Lord is going to do his part? Now again, the dominant theme introduced in verse 1, in this crazy world, where does my help ultimately come from? And the answer is found in verse 2, the Lord. And we learn in this psalm 4 things about the Lord. You ready? Verses 1 through 2, you can just jot these down, review it in your own time. In verses 1 through 2, it is revealed that the Lord is our helper. I love that word. One who comes alongside to assist. The Spirit of God is our comforter, our paraclete, that one who comes alongside to help and to aid. If you look at verses 3 through 4, he's our keeper. He's the one that keeps us. You weren't saved by grace through faith just to try really hard on your own to continually fail. You were saved by grace through faith, and the just shall live by what? By faith. And that faith will sustain you and keep you because it invites his supernatural power to be at work on your behalf. The third thing, he's our protector. We just talked about it, verses 5 through 6. And finally, verses 7 through 8, he's our preserver. There's a 4-point sermon right there. Bible school, 3 points in a poem. There's 4 points right there. Helper, keeper, protector, preserver. Now, these realities were not just true for the ancient Jews traveling to Jerusalem. They remain true in all generations. Why? Because Jesus Christ is the same when? Yesterday, and today, and forever. These are things you can bank your life on. If you're a believer, you are banking your life and the life to come on these principles. But revel in that, because he's faithful, and he's very good at what he does. Psalm 122. Who wrote this one, by the way? What does your Bible say? David. So again, David wrote several of the total 15 songs of ascent. I rejoiced with those who said to me, let's go to the house of the Lord. Our feet are standing in your gates, Jerusalem. Jerusalem is built like a city that is closely compacted together. That's where the tribes go up, the tribes of the Lord, to praise the name of the Lord according to the statutes given to Israel. There stands the thrones for judgment, the thrones of the house of David. Verse 6, pray for the peace of Jerusalem. May those who love you be secure. May there be peace within your walls and security within your citadels. For the sake of my family and friends, I will say, peace be within you. Finally, verse 9, for the sake of the house of the Lord our God, I will seek your prosperity. Dominant theme introduced in verse 1, the joy that comes from being in the presence of God. Again, we must understand the Old Testament relationship between Jerusalem and the presence of God. Jerusalem was the place where God uniquely dwelt on this earth, and there was no other place quite like it. So when David was invited by these unnamed peers to go to Jerusalem and to worship, what was his reaction to that? Oh, I got a football game to watch. I can't make it, sorry. He was pumped. This was the kind of guy who when moving the Ark of the Covenant, he couldn't stop dancing. And when his wife had a problem with it, woman, you haven't seen anything yet. I'm going to dance all the more. David was a passionate worshiper who rejoiced in going to see the Lord. I love that. Now, the remainder of the psalm I don't want to delve into, but it breaks down into two sections, both centering upon the city of Jerusalem. Verses 3 through 5 talk about the priority and the significance of Jerusalem, and verses 6 through 8 really give an appeal for prayer for that city. Now, it is true that we no longer pilgrimage to Jerusalem. How many here have actually been to Jerusalem? Probably one or two. One, two, maybe there's a few at home. But for the most part, we haven't been there. We've never pilgrimaged or made the spiritual trek to that city. So does this passage have any application? The answer is yes. Because there's a wonderful truth that this points to. Old Testament, the Lord uniquely dwelt in a tabernacle in the days of David and later a temple under Solomon and beyond. Where does the Lord uniquely dwell today? Who is or what is the temple of the Spirit of God? He dwells within us, within the heart of the believer. We have access to an intimacy with God that men like David couldn't have imagined possible. I want you to think about that. Because people will often say, oh, man, I wish I lived in Bible days and saw what they saw. They would happily trade places. Because you have access to something, really specifically someone, that only one person in the entire nation could access fully, albeit once a year. But now he dwells with us. When it talks about Jesus dying and the curtain of the temple being rent or torn, it's because he was about to make his abode in us. That's wonderful. So in a sense, yes, I don't have to go to Jerusalem to visit the Lord, but I still have to recognize that he dwells somewhere, and I have the opportunity for him to dwell within me. Now, before we run on this point, I do want to say that though the emphasis on Jerusalem seems alien or foreign to us because we live in a different time, different age, different continent, and beyond, there will come a day when all of the righteous of all time, of all nations, will dwell in a new Jerusalem. So one day I'm going to live there, and it's going to be glorious. But for now, we continue on through our journey to Psalm 123. We're almost done. If you feel like you're getting fed by your fire hose, that's okay. Just keep drinking. I lift up my eyes to you who sit enthroned in heaven. As the eyes of slaves look to the hands of their master, as the eyes of a female slave look to the hands of her mistress, so our eyes look to the Lord our God till he shows us mercy. Have mercy on us, Lord. Have mercy on us, for we have endured no end of contempt. We have endured no end of ridicule from the arrogant or the contempt of the proud. Now hear me as I begin to slowly wind to a close. Having looked ahead to the glories of Jerusalem, literal and figurative in Psalm 122, Psalm 123 brings us down from the mountain back into the valley. From that place of God's immediate presence, now back into a world that is fallen and broken. And if Psalm 120 emphasizes the ruination of the world through deception and violence, now the psalmist laments the fact that he has to put up with, that we have to put up with unending harassment from the ungodly. Verse 3, the second half, we have endured no end of contempt, no end of ridicule from the arrogant or from the proud. We have to realize, and it's hard, that as much as you love Jesus, not everyone in your world will. And that's a painful reality. There are people that look at our faith, the faith, as something to be ridiculed or dismissed, something to be mocked. I've had people say, how can someone intelligent possibly believe in what you say to believe? I've heard people say to me, you believe in fairy tales and mythology? Atheists love the idea of Christians believing in what they call a flying spaghetti monster. It's a word, it's a phrase that they use, jokingly, mockingly. And as much as I would love at times to just wave a wand and have that problem fixed, we do live in a world where there are many who are perishing and will go in that direction. And they're never going to understand or love what you profess to be true or believe. And that's painful. It's especially painful when it comes from family. Can anybody nod? You've been there. You know what it's like to have your faith belittled, or to be told you can't talk about something that, frankly, it's all you want to talk about, because it'd be like someone telling me, James, you're fine, but please stop talking about Misty. Because to me, the Lord is just as real and just as important, if not more so, of course, than my own wife. So to be told I can't talk about that, to me, it breaks my head and my heart. But I get where people are coming from, because I didn't come out of the womb a believer either. I was 20 when I came to Christ. I didn't want to hear it at one point either. Thankfully, the Lord reached out to me as he reaches out to so many people. What is the appropriate response in that kind of spiritual condition and climate that we do find ourselves in? Well, look at what the author says starting in verse 1. I lift my eyes. To what? To you, Lord, the one who sits enthroned in heaven. And I look to you for the provision of mercy, going through latter parts of the psalm. I look to you with the same degree of dependence and necessity that a slave looks to their master. Let me just hit a very important point that we can all often forget. We are not engaged in a relationship amongst equals. There is Lord, and then there is me. What's my posture before the Lord? That of a servant. Literally, that of a slave. That word makes us uncomfortable for good reasons, but it's a biblical word nonetheless. The only way to navigate this sinful world full of sinful people, deception, violence, and beyond is to entrust ourselves to the care of the one who is willing to provide mercy. Not only forgiveness, but this sense of empowerment in sustaining authority, so that you will continue on through your journey until you reach Jerusalem, literal or heavenly. Final one, Psalm 124. Who wrote this one? Very good. It's a Psalm of David, so I want you to keep that in mind. If the Lord had not been on our side, let Israel say. If the Lord had not been on our side when people attacked us, they would have swallowed us alive. When their anger flared against us, the flood would have engulfed us. The torrent would have swept over us, the raging waters. They would have swept us away. But praise be to the Lord, who has not let us to be torn by their teeth. We have escaped like a bird from the fowler's snare. The snare has been broken, and we have escaped. Our help, going back to previous Psalms now, is in the name of the Lord, the maker of heaven and earth. Now, as I do close with this, the theme of the psalmist here, David, is the celebration of past protection and provision. Now, the previous songs of ascent, 120 through 123, looked to the Lord for provision and supply in the present and moving on into the future. But Psalm 24 changes gears, and now the psalmist is looking backward over past victories in God. David could say, at the time of this writing, that God had been with him, had seen him through many difficulties and challenges. The ancient Jews who were making the trek to Jerusalem could look back over their memory in the record of their lives, and they could say that God had been with them. Is that something that you can say? The answer is yes. How many, by the waving of a hand or a nod, or even at home, welcome to those who were at home this morning, you can say there have been times when if God didn't show up, you would have been overwhelmed. But he did, and he preserved, he provided, he supplied, he protected, and he empowered you to move forward into the hope and the purpose that he has for you. That's all of us if we're honest. 42 years, I can look back. Even before I knew him, he was still kind, and he was still gracious, and he was still working on my behalf. That's wonderful, and that's who we serve. What's the song, Help Me Out? Amazing Grace, how sweet the sound. Now, there's a movement to rewrite this that saved someone like me. That's the new version. Throw it away, burn it. Never talk of it again. That saved what? A wretch like me. I once was lost, but now I am found, was blind. You see, the author's looking back over his life. 'Twas grace that taught my heart to fear. I'd sing it, but I love you. I don't want you to run out. Grace my fears relieved. How precious did that grace appear the hour I first believed. Final one. Through many dangers and toils and snares, I've already come. Again, the author, the writer's looking back at all the times he could have been completely overwhelmed and broken and ruined, but God was faithful. His grace, it's brought me safe thus far. And grace will inevitably what? Lead me home. Again, we're pilgrims, gang. This is not our home. And the reason so many believers are so ineffective in this world is we're far too at home in it. We are pilgrims. We're just passing through. Don't get too comfy. Now, our primary focus should be onward and upward to the Lord. We should be a people of hope, especially in hopeless times. But we should also be a people who have the wherewithal to look back every now and then and to remember, and to allow that remembrance to turn into thanksgiving, and that thanksgiving to turn into worship and a renewed, invigorated faith and sense of direction as you move forward. Because again, if God has done it way back when, for these people and in your life, why can't he do it in the here and now and ongoingly? There's something wonderful about the Lord that we serve, and there's this wonderful sense of travel and journey and progression and maturation and development and pilgrimage through these Psalms, but also in our lives. So I pray that something this morning stood out to you. You didn't have to get it all, but I do pray that you got what the Lord had specifically for you. That whatever was thrown against the proverbial wall, that something would stick and resonate and cause you to meditate, to develop, to move forward, and to be the person that he has called you to be. We're going to close in a word of prayer, then one or two quick announcements. Father in heaven, we thank you for this opportunity to gather both in person and digitally. I thank you for these Psalms because they are profitable for us. They speak to us, they inspire, they encourage, they help us to become what you've called us to be. So Lord, as we go our separate ways in the moments ahead, I do pray you would be with each and every one, with those who are here, those who are home, those who are traveling or otherwise away today. Continue to lead us unto yourself as we journey through this life in you and ultimately unto you, in the name of Jesus Christ. For homework, you can feel free to read Psalms 125 through 129, the next block of 5 Psalms. Let the Lord speak to you over the course of this week. Thanks for coming today. It's always good to see you folks here. And again, those of you who are at home, should you desire to give, you can feel free to give online at the website, newlifebarrie.org. And for those who are here, there are offering boxes on this back wall. And starting next week, we'll have one downstairs as well. Lord bless you and keep you sincerely, and make his face shine on you and be gracious to you. Lord, turn his face toward you and give you peace. We'll see you folks soon. God bless.